Hello, today we will continue looking at percent change problems that have to do with percent increase or percent decrease depending on the word problem. Let's begin. We are on page 80 of our textbooks. Let me write it down. Page 80. The table shows the enrollment in Greenfield School. Like I said before in my previous video, very often percent change, increase or decrease, typically is based on the data provided. And this data can be visualized as a table, like in this problem, or as a bar model, as a bar graph, or as a line plot, and etc. Different visualizations tools in data science. So let's take a look at this table. We do have year 2007. How many students were enrolled in the school? 800. What about 1 year later? 880. Clearly, there was some growth, right? There were 80 students that were added. What percent increase is that? We have to express this change of 80 students more as a percentage. So we know that before there were fewer and now there are more. We have 80 students more, and that is our change. In this case, it's plus 80. How do we calculate percent increase? We take this change and we compare it to our benchmark. We are comparing it to the benchmark quantity. What are we comparing to in here? Find the percent increase of the enrollment between 2007 and 2008. The year 2007 is our benchmark, right? That's our 100%. That's our initial quantity, right here. We're comparing it to a previous year. So it's 80, which is the change, compared to 800. Again, why 800? Because that's our benchmark quantity. That's what we are comparing to. We divide by what we are comparing to. And 80 divided by 800 is 1/10. We can just say 1/10 times 100%, or we can say 0.1 times 100%. And of course, it's 10% increase. I hope you understood the concept of how we are comparing the change to the benchmark. Next, problem number 2. Mr. Thompson earned $2,400 a month. During a recession, he accepted a pay cut, and now he earns $2,260 a month. Find the percent decrease. Clearly, we see that poor Mr. Thomas had to lower his salary during the recession. There's not enough money to go around. So sometimes, in order to keep a job, people prefer to take a pay cut. They say, okay, you can pay me a little less, but at least I'm going to be employed. And when things improve, I can get my salary back. So, step 1, what happened to Mr. T? Before, he was making $2,400 monthly. After, he started making less, $2,260. Step 1. First, let's find the change in his salary, the drop in the salary. And of course, to find the difference, we use subtraction. That's our 3rd grade. And it is $140 increase. So this piece, right, this difference is $140. Now, they're not asking how much was his salary increase. They say find the percent decrease. So step 2, we have to divide. We can also do it as a single step. Let me show you. So as a single step, it would look like this. 2,400 minus 2,260 divide by what we are comparing to. We are comparing to this benchmark, right? This is our benchmark. His previous salary, right? That was his 100% back in the day, and now it's less. So we have to divide by 2,400. And if you do the math, of course we did partially. I'm going to write right here. It's 140 divided by 2,400. We can cancel the 0, becomes 14 over 240. And we must express it as percentage. So we must multiply times 100. And if you keep simplifying the fraction, you will get the answer of 5.83% decrease. That is the pay cut that Mr. Thompson took in order to maintain his job. This was an interesting problem. Now let's take a look at problem number 3. Shara magazine sales. Remember I said a lot of these problems will be backed by data, whether it's arranged in a table or a bar graph. And right here we have a small line plot. Let's analyze the line plot. What do we have on the y-axis? We have the sales of magazines, right? This is Shara magazine sales. And what do we have on the x-axis? We have the timeline, right? We have months of the year, January, February, March, April, May. What happened between January and February? Well, good things happen, right? Shara magazine sales jumped 5,000 copies a month. Now I'm going to pick up another color. What happened between February and March? The magazine sales experienced a decline. Well, what was the drop during that period? Minus 5,500 copies. Next, what happened between March and April? Well, the graph is looking up again. And that's because the magazine sales were doing much better. And look, from 49,500, they moved to 59,000. Almost 10,000 copies more were sold. So let's label it plus 9,900 copies more, plus 9,900 copies more. And finally, between April and May, maybe we can use, again, a light blue color. Between April and May, it's again a slight increase, right? How much? Plus 5,940 more copies. Look, so step 1, I labeled all the changes in magazine sales, right? So let's copy this information into our table. So we have this 4 periods, right, listed in our line plot, 4 periods. So let's go ahead. What happened between January and February? Well, we know in January they sold 50,000 copies, right? 50,000 copies. And in February was 55,000, right? 55,000. So clearly this is a percent increase, right? We have an increase in sales. Now let's calculate what exact percentage it is. So step one, let's take the difference, and that's 5,000 copies, and let's divide it. Let's compare it to the benchmark. In this case, the benchmark is previous month, which is January, and 50,000 copies, okay? 50,000 copies. And of course, we have to express it as percentage, so we have to multiply by 100. My friends, please remember, simplify before you multiply. 5 over 50 becomes 0.1 times 100. Let's just write it down. 0.1 times 100% equals 10% increase. 10% increase. So I'm just going to write it down. I'm going to write it down as that color choice. 10% increase. Notice we were comparing to January, right? That was our benchmark. Next, I'm going to pick up a purple color. What happened between February and March? Well, I hope you see that between February and March, compared to February, the sales decreased. Right? So there was a decrease in sales. Well, what percentage was that? Let's find out. We do know that in February, there were 49. Sorry, it's not February, it's March. Reading the graph, we know that in February, they sold 55,000 magazines. Okay, so let's go. Step 2 for the second period. We already found the difference, right? It's 500 drop, right? Here it is, 5,500 drop, and we divide by what we are comparing to, which is 55,000 copies sold in February. And always multiply times 100%. Therefore, it is again, right? Remember, simplify before you multiply. 55 divided by 550 is 1/10 or 10%. There was a 10% drop, 10% decrease, 10% decrease. I typically like to point it out with an arrow. Finally, in March, what do we have in March? Well, we know that in March, they sold 49,500 magazines. And look, the sales went up. We can clearly see the increase in sales. So let's calculate it in percentage. So step 3, right? We know that the difference was, look at this jump. We calculated earlier, 9,900 copies were sold. We divide by what we are comparing to. And now, in this particular case, our benchmark is March. We are comparing April to March. So we're dividing by 49,500 magazine sales in March. Always multiply times 100 and simplify before you multiply. And therefore, oh my goodness, 99 to 495. How many times 99 goes into 495? It is 1/5. 1/5 times 100%, or the same as 20% increase. Look how well the magazine is doing. 20% increase. Finally, I'm again picking up blue color. We are comparing April to May. We know in April the sales were 59,400, and we see there's still an increase. They're still growing their sales, which is very good for them. Still an increase. So let's write down step number 4. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete the x-axis just to make things a little cleaner. Let's make step number 4, calculate. So we know that there was a 5,940 magazine jump, right? Here it is, right? It came from our first calculation. And we divided by what we're comparing to, which is April, 59,400. I hope the answer is jumping at you. Simplify before you multiply. And we know that again, this is a 10. 1/10 times 100% equals 10% increase, 10% improvement in magazine sales. 10% increase. Look how it went step by step, comparing the change to our benchmarking month. What dividing by what we're comparing to. Let's answer the rest of the question. 5% increase in the sales of Share magazine between January and May. Well, now again, January is our benchmark, and we're comparing it to May. Well, let's do the full calculation, right? How many magazines were sold in January? 50,000. And in May, oh my goodness, oh my, 65,340 copies minus 50,000, right? So we do see that there was an increase. In order to find percent change, we must divide by what we are comparing to. Of course, we will multiply times 100. What are we comparing to? January. That's our benchmark. 50,000 copies. So 65,340 minus 50,000, it is 15,340 copies. Divide by 50,000, which is our benchmark, times 100%. I will let you do the math, but I hope you got more than 20%. It should be around 30% increase, of course, increase. Now, final question. It is projected. Now, this is very important. Now we're looking into the future. that there is going to be a 15% increase in the sales of Shara magazine in June, right? So imagine what's going to happen. They're projecting a further increase for the month of June, right? For the month of June, 15%. How many copies of the magazine should be printed? Well, this is not a percent increase question. They're just saying, well, what do we have in May? We have 65,340. Well, that is our benchmark, right? We're comparing it to May, 65,340 copies. Well, what is 15% of that? And we've learned how to calculate percentages last week. 15 out of 100 times 65,340 copies. That's May. Let me label it. That's May, right? And if you do the math, you will realize that they want to sell 9,801 magazines more in June. Okay, so by the way, just to show you how another way to do math, 0.15, right? That's 15 divided by 100 and times 65,340. Let me rewrite it vertically. 65,340 times 0.15. That I know you can do yourself. So if we want the 9,801 copies more compared to what we had in May, therefore in June, the projected sales should be 75,141 copies. Very interesting problem. I hope you enjoyed it.